exclusive audio from the Candidate Experience Workshop in New Jersey. That's next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
Hey everyone, it's Chris Russell. Got a chance to go to the Candidate Experience Workshop in New Brunswick, New Jersey, hosted by Johnson & Johnson and the Talent Board, where Kevin Grossman and his team put on a great kind of afternoon conference for several dozen HR professionals from the area. And we talked a lot about employer branding, candidate communication, feedback, all great stuff. And I learned a lot there. Got some audio here for you. In the first part, you're going to hear Kevin Grossman talk about some of the employer branding techniques and tactics and stats that we kind of went over in the early afternoon sessions, followed by a kind of a wrap-up of candidate communication and feedback. Got some stories in there for you. Really interesting discussions that we had during the day there at the Riverview Executive House. So appreciate the hospitality from Johnson & Johnson and the Talent Board. And without further ado, here's the audio.
So now what we're going to do, we're going to have a discussion around employment branding. We're going to break up into 4 groups, okay? 2 of you will go in there, 2 of you will stay in here, and Chris and Patrick, you're going to help the first exercise in this group, and then we'll rotate as well. So, but let me get the slides queued up, and I'll kind of set the stage a little bit. Some more data. One thing I didn't joke about in the beginning that you have to, I apologize for the 9-point font in my slides, okay? But you seem, I know it was hard to see out there anyway, right? But now it's like big, really big. All right, so a couple of quick things. When we talk about employment branding in the research phase, especially as it relates to our research and just recruiting in general, we're talking about everything that happens before they apply, all right? So pre-application, researching your organizations, what are the jobs, what's your culture like, what are you sharing on your career sites, how you're communicating with candidates, if at all, before they even apply. All those things. So here's some other highlights for, is that rain sliding down our window? Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Wow. Most of us, what we find in the data year after year, and I think this holds true for a lot of you too, most of us do our own job searches. Okay, we really do. Unless you, especially from a recruiting perspective, unless it was a key, hard to find, technical, there's certain kinds of positions that you have to totally source for, data scientists these days, the list goes on. Most of us, though, we're doing our own job search. We're researching the companies that we're interested in, we're looking at the jobs we're interested in, and the candidates tell us that on a regular basis every year. Another thing is that once they identify your brand and your company as a potential employer that they want to work for, of course they're going to your career site. That's the top number one as well. And then the most important values, which we'll check out in the next one, but the most important thing when it comes to marketing content that they want to see about, and they tell us this mostly every year this has been trending, it's always about your values as a company, okay? So now let's look at a little bit more data kind of setting the stage. There's a lot of different channels that candidates are looking at when they're researching you and your employers and your jobs and your brand. This isn't the exhaustive list. That's in our research paper that you can download for free. This is just the top ones, the highlight ones. Obviously, your career site. Referrals have never been more important for candidates than they have been this last year in our data. It's actually jumped quite a bit the past couple of years. And that's great. We've been telling each other for years, right, to build your networks, nurture them, leverage them. Candidates are doing it just as much as you depend on your referrals now, too, or at least more so. And of course, they're going to employee review sites, Glassdoor, Indeed, anywhere where they can find information about what other candidates and employees are saying about you and your company and your jobs. That's obviously Indeed, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, again, really important, about other kind of sites that they're leveraging. Of course, internet searches, even before they identify your business and your brand. Where do we go? We go online and search, right? Marketing content, values, customer, culture, and testimonials always have been high on the list for candidates on a regular basis. And even testimonials have increased a little bit over the past couple of years. Job content, of course, your description, how you're posting and listing the job, as well as salary and benefits if you're listing any of that information. and the benefit details. That's all important, obviously, right? It's top of mind for all of us when we're looking for a job. But things that they want to see more of on a regular basis is why people are working for you. Not just the testimonials, which is important, but why are they staying there? Why are they working for you? How many of you employ videos on your career sites with employees talking about why they like to work there and hiring that? Good. You got a few hands? So that's great. Okay. That's what they want to see more of from you, according to our data. And then also not only do they want to know more about, again, compensation, we all do, right? Mm-hmm. But they want to know, what does the successful candidate look like to you? I.e., besides what you have in the job description, who are you really looking for? Do you even know what that is? Can you articulate that to me, the candidate that might be interested? And then your career path examples. It used to be we talked about the career ladder, right? And then it was the lattice was the metaphor. Now it's kind of like, sometimes it's a hot mess, as we all know. But what is that? What are the development opportunities for me at your company? This is something that candidates want to know more of, all right? And these are the questions that we're going to talk about in a minute, but I think what I'll do is kind of set the tone, go a little bit backwards, give you a couple of other examples from other companies that have won candies, that are also embedded in our research reports. We actually have about 10 case studies from last year that you can read through North America, and even all of our reports the past few years. But last year, CH2M, an engineering firm, now is called Jacobs. They were acquired last year. But one of the things they've done really well the past 2 years is really leverage content that's relevant to the engineers they're targeting and the individuals they're targeting at the organization, to share that with the industry to attract individuals. So not just about your job and pay and what the job's about and why you want to work there, but relevant industry information, right? They've also used their employee advocates in a very valuable way to help promote the organization. And they actually did a lot of, the year before last in our case study, they had like over $900,000, they say, in earned media using employee advocates and ambassadors sharing relevant content and industry information with the industry about engineering topics. So just one quick example for you. There is more details and then Virtusa, who is here, right? Where's my Virtusa folks? There they are. One of the things that you guys continue to have live chats on your site, recruiting chats?
Not yet.
Oh, it depends on the location, but you have done it though. You have, right? Because we wrote about it. You better say you do. So anyway, just nod and say yes, we do, Kevin. There you go. But so whether it's a live chat with like an actual recruiter, maybe certain designated times during the week, about you can ask questions about the job, the company before I even apply. Anybody experimenting with chat bots?
I'm building one.
Excellent. You're building one right now.
Yeah.
This is, and I'm fascinated by this. I think they're getting more accurate with how they're doing Q&A. There's volumes of data that are getting crunched in some of these variety of different chatbots that are available today. One of the things that I find fascinating is that it's filling a place where there was no communication before. So it's not even really a displacement issue, right? It's just about there was no communication before, but now there can be with chatbots that are getting smarter over time and that are training. And I've played with them. Olivia, which is one of our sponsors, it's an amazing tool and had a whole conversation about career development opportunities, and it was accurate. It was really accurate. It wasn't a staged demo either. It was a real one on one of their customer sites. So this stuff's real, and it's coming, and it's not going away, and it's going to get better, but it's another way to engage candidates before they even apply, when you may not even have the resources to do it in the first place with a live person.
They tend to like it too, don't they? The candidates.
Yeah, and one of the things that's fascinating is that they're thanking the chatbot. Thanks, and they like it because they're getting some engagement. And by the way, how many of you I know I do, thank Alexa, Siri. I have a virtual assistant that named after my oldest daughter Beatrice. It's called Zoom.ai that I thank all the time. That's the reality that we're in right now. So. These are things that Candy winners do really well, that we see consistently in the data all the time. Again, not just about the written job description. How many of you, speaking of video, have ever done a video job description? That's something you should probably consider. It's a great differentiator. And having maybe, or actually the hiring manager talking about the job of why you want to get hired. So another opportunity to differentiate. Your career site obviously still matters, although it's lost some importance in our data. We've seen, just because there's so many channels out there for them to research you now, right? And then that customer service approach that they're just talking about, actually engaging the candidates before they even apply, and then communication and feedback. Again, at every stage of the recruiting process, Candy winners are investing more on that side than the baseline of all the other companies that participate in the data. All right, so based on that, so now what we're going to do is I want half of that group that was in the other. So a couple of quick stories before we kind of hear from you all.
Not right now.
We get a lot of stories about good and bad communications at all these workshops, and I hear them all the time, but one that I'm going to share with you that I just can't get out of my head, and it was the hiring manager, which I'm sure you've had your share of dealing with hiring managers who kind of just say the wrong thing. No filter hiring manager. This was one where we were asking, about, which we'll hear from some of you too, what was like the worst rejection that you've ever heard or experienced or seen or witnessed or any of that, or heard from friends, blah, blah, blah. And there was one hiring manager that gave this feedback directly back to the candidate, that A, you were too young, and you didn't have enough piss and vinegar inside. Literally, that's what the hiring manager said. That actually did get escalated to a suit. There's an expression called there's an expression called full of piss and vinegar, like you're very you're scrappy, you're seasoned, you're outgoing. There's a lot of different, but this hiring manager literally used those words with the candidate. But it was the young part, though. You were not young enough, was what got the whole situation in trouble. But then there's, there are those that are good stories. And one of the things that we'll talk about, I don't know if any of you had ever considered giving coupons, if you're a consumer company, obviously, or gift cards to rejected candidates, final stage candidates. It's actually something that Kimberly Clark does. It's something that T-Mobile has experimented with. There's others that come to mind, but there was one. This is a positive communication now. There was a recruiter a couple of years ago at one of our workshops that it was sharing the story. It was holiday time. They were a small consumer company. With final stage candidates, they were giving gift cards out for the holiday, and he got a nice note, sad note, but a nice note back from one of his candidates that he ended up he rejected. It said, "Thank you so much. This is great. I lost my wife last year. I lost my job this year. And now I actually can buy my kids some gifts." And when, we're all like, oh my God. But that's kind of an extreme sad story. But I think some of you, I'm sure you've also gotten maybe positive responses from your own candidates, right? Like, hey, I'm sorry, I understand I'm not going to get the job, but thanks for letting me straight with me. Thanks for letting me know. Jerry is not in the room, is he? But there's another story. I hope I do say it right. But he was talking, so Hilton, speaking along the lines of giving things away, Hilton was... in the past has given their employee gold travel card, discount card, to final stage rejected candidates. And what they did was, and then track the spending of those, and the delta for 1 year ended up being, I think it was 110 million. Is that the right number? I think so. That's a lot of money, a lot of revenue generated by these are rejected candidates, right? That are using that card. So there is a value of that idea as part of the communication of giving them something that are good. Anyway, so what I want to hear now, somebody in this room has got to have a juicy story, the worst rejection that you have heard or experienced. Who wants to share? Anybody? This is just a group discussion now. Come on, one of the group. Does anybody have a good one? Yes.
Years ago, I had a manager similar to what your example was. He was an IT gentleman, and he told the candidate that he was too young, and that he wasn't married, and he wasn't serious enough for the job. Wow.
Did that turn into any kind of legal? Oh yeah, there you go. Oh yeah. I mean, so.
Well, they got a warning on that one, but
There you go. Anybody else? Yes.
So we talked about, the worst response. There's no response, but
yes.
also
somebody shared that they had gone through quite a lengthy interview process, gotten down to the final 2 candidates, and then all of a sudden just got like a very generic, very standard thanks but no thanks. And that was almost worse than no response, because it was like, we did so much of this together, why couldn't you be a little more personal?
New York Presbyterian was sharing in this group that you had like a 2-year experiment of responding, human response to every single applicant. That's a really hard thing to scale for, but there was a value. You had a couple of kind of one-off stories, but for the most part there was a value, a lot of appreciative candidates, right? Yeah. But I would argue, and I hope most of you feel this way, when you get to the final stage and the later stages of those candidates, those and even the silver medalists, they need phone calls, right? Yeah, sure. They need more than just that email that goes out on a regular basis. Any nice stories of any of you that you had? It was a nice, whether you sent it yourself or you heard back from a candidate. Yeah,
we heard in our group phone calls were the best, even though communications where they receive constructive feedback, and then additional resources. Whether that was resume writing tips, career coaches, something like that. Just saying thank you, but no thank you, and thank you for your time, and here's some resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know that we were also talking in this group when I was overhearing about what's worse, no communication or miscommunication. And I think from my perspective, I was sharing that it's just no communication is worse, because miscommunication, there's an opportunity hopefully to correct that. But no communication at all. I was saying, all of us probably know every single employer, no matter how far you got in their recruiting process. Well, if you never heard back from them again, you don't ever forget who they were either, right? I could name mine, but I couldn't name mine right off the top of my head. What should always be included in your rejection communications? Always should be included.
Something.
Something, yes, that's good. We'll narrow it down a little bit. What? Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. That's what we always recommend. Thank you for your time. Now, I know none of you, I don't think, raised your hands when I was asking, are you giving some feedback to candidates? Well, New York Presbyterian does, to a certain degree.
Yep, so we talked a little bit about how we do it ad hoc. So we probably do it for better, for referrals. We do it a lot depending on the positions, and we do it a little selfishly. So if it's a hard to fill position, then we're more likely to call that candidate and give real feedback and keep in touch with them, versus a position where we have 200 people apply. We're probably not going to call and have that same conversation.
I know one thing that Jason Moreau from Surveil in a minute is going to talk about. Then, by the way, Surveil is our data platform and our survey platform for Talent Board. Declined offers is another opportunity to asking them. This is more about asking for feedback now, but along the same veins of why did you decline? And anyway, I won't take your story away from you. I know. But what should just never be included? Things like piss and vinegar, right? You don't want that. What should not just things? No personal stuff, right? No personal identifiers. Nothing like derogatory. Now, when it comes to asking for feedback, I know I had a smattering of hands on the new hire side. A couple of people for asking for rejections for feedback. Why, for most of you, is it a resource issue that you're not asking for feedback? Is you don't know where to start? You're worried about what you're going to hear? I'm just curious. this is a safe space. It's a safe space.
What we talked about in our group was it's easy to ask for the feedback. It's hard then to take action.
And that was my next step. Thank you for doing that. You're right on the money. Yeah, what do? You can get that data, but then are you doing anything actionable to actually make those improvements around that? I know. And that's something you do need to work through inside your organizations because, but that's why I go back and emphasize the small incremental changes that you could potentially make. If you find out at the application stage that you're asking for, and this is, by the way, I did ask this at the beginning, right? How many of you apply for your own jobs? I did, right? Mm-hmm. And it was only a smattering of hands. But if you find out you get some feedback from candidates as something that you can address internally, then you dang sure better be taking something actionable on that, whether it's, cutting out some redundant questions in your application process or better management of the interview prep. How many of you do any kind of prep with your candidates that are coming in for interviews? Letting them know who they're going to meet with, giving them schedules, coordinating that for them, right? I mean, this is all critical stuff. I told you earlier that one of the big negatives is that if their time is disrespected and their interviews and appointments, that's a big no-no. And unfortunately, that's hard when you're dealing, again, with hiring managers. But that's a whole nother discussion we could have about interview process, which we didn't do this time. But then, so the last thing is, and I hope all of you at least consider not just our program, but just think about even if I ask 3 questions of the candidates and the feedback, that how valuable that information is. And again, there is got to be something actionable that you could probably do without overthinking it too much in your organizations. I think those who have done it, those that are in this room that have made those changes, and whether they won Candy Awards or not, know that you can do it in big and small teams as well. At least I would argue. So what is one thing that we're all going to do? We're going to consider asking for candidate feedback, right? Is that what we're going to do? Boy, I need some more enthusiasm.
If legal lets us, because that was one of the things.
Legal's, yeah, that's always an elephant in the room, right? But I think a lot of the companies that have done it today can talk to you about how they've actually, that's why this is a great group for you to interact with even post-workshop. And I'm sure some of the companies like Mayor Presbyterian, Johnson & Johnson, Virtusa, and Verizon and others would be willing to talk shop with you about that, some of the things they've done with their teams and how they've gotten around that and worked with legal and compliance and to be able to start asking for feedback. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is turn it over just for a few minutes to Jason Moreau, who's the CEO of Surveil, and he's just going to talk about the different recommended things that you could be asking for feedback on, from pre-application all the way to declined offers.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Is this working?
Yes, it is.
So Surveil, we are the data platform for the talent board, but how we make our money is ongoing, continuous feedback for organizations. So what I'm going to talk to you a bit about today is some of the blind spots that we see out there that organizations are just kind of like overlooking. And a lot of it's what you're overlooking is because there's no real automation yet. So when we're out there, here's the typical feedback cycle that we see, is that, organizations will go into their ATS and they'll say, okay, well, this month we want to go and survey interview people by our hiring managers or our new hires. So they'll go into their ATS, they'll do an export of that status type or date range, put it into a CSV file, upload it to a survey tool, and then send out their survey. And then, a week or 2 later, they look back, see all the results, and they take the results, export them, put them into an Excel spreadsheet, and start doing our pivot tables and analysis. And then what ends up happening is 90 days later, like, I gotta do this again, and it starts to become a chore. So it's frustrating. And so the outcome of that is there's blind spots. So when I talk about blind spots, there's a pre-applicant phase, which is your career site. There's applicants on there, they're all anonymous. The phone screening phase with your talent acquisition team, if you have a large talent acquisition team, you want to know and make sure that all the messaging is correct and consistent. Interviews, this is kind of the hottest topic within all what we see out there in industry, is like what's happening with our hiring managers, what's being communicated. The declined offers, so Kevin touched on that, and I'll touch on that a little bit further. The other areas like silver medalists, this is a really great area to go and measure feedback from your candidates. These are folks that have been through the entire process and they're number 2 or 3, and so they've seen everything, and they can give you some really valuable insights. And then hiring manager feedback, so understanding, communicating to your internal managers, how satisfied are you with some of the talent that we're presenting to you. And then onboarding, so what worked for the onboarding, what didn't work, and then obviously quality of hire metrics. And this is like the ongoing continuous feedback now as you're an employee. So when I look at the full cycle of the feedback cycle, I always kind of break it up into 3 pillars. First pillar being the pre-applicant phase, so it's all your career site people, they're anonymous. And then there's the post-application, so now they've actually found a position that they want to apply for, they're inside your applicant tracking system. And then post-hire, the ongoing employee experience. So when I talk about career site surveys, most organizations are really, I saw in here, surveying after a new hire or after an interview. But when you look at your career site and you had some kind of feedback on your career site, we're all spending hundreds of thousands of dollars annually to funnel everyone where? To the career site. And So if you're only surveying, my point here is that if you're only surveying after a new hire or after an interview, 98% of the people that hit your career site never apply to a job. So then if only 2/10 actually get interviewed, you're only really surveying a very small segment of the population that interact with your brand. So by having some kind of always on kind of feedback on your career site, you can start to now learn a lot of different experiences of what's happening out there. So, career sites, you can also gather questions like, what's your perception of our employer brand at this particular stage? Did you have any difficulties uploading your resume with the technologies or something like this? What's your primary purpose in looking for a new career? TNP did a really wonderful pilot with some of their brands and their client base, and there's a direct correlation between candidates that think highly of your employer brand and what they're looking for in a career, and basically the higher that they think of your brand.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that audio. I did. A lot of great stories in there from today's events. Check out the talent board at thetalentboard.org. They're having their annual candy event for award winners in October, I believe, down in Florida. So definitely a great event to check out. And that'll do for this edition of the podcast. Again, thank my sponsors, HireTool, HireTool.com, the sourcer's best friend. Check them out at HireTool.com. And Rejobify. Find a better way to reject candidates with Rejobify's new service, Rejobify.com. That's it. I'll see you next time.
Another episode of RecTech is in the books. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com, where you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. RecTech Media helps both HR tech firms and employers to get more clients or candidates through our consulting practice and online tools. So be sure to check out our sites like recruiting headlines, job fairing, and more to stay up to date on what's happening in recruiting. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast.